Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /entitled people, where some people literally think they can do what they want, when they want. And in today's episode, Karens think they're above the law, guys. They're demanding their kids be served alcohol, starting fights, and one OP tells a story about the time a Karen attacked a worker and she regretted it big time. It's another wild lineup, so sit back, relax, and as always, try not to shake your heads too hard at these posts. So I'm a 24-year-old bar manager in a fairly new bar. Coming into my shift on a Friday afternoon, I was warned by another coworker about this guy who might need to be cut off as he was way too drunk. The guy then proceeded to stumble to the bar, and he's swaying, slurring his words, and he's requesting some drinks off of me. I explain that I wasn't comfortable serving him anymore and he may need to leave. And that's when he called his mother Karen. The hair, the attitude, the entitlement, all in one person. She storms over to the bar, and this 50-year-old woman is requesting the manager, to which unfortunately, it's me. She then stands in my face pointing, and she says, "My son is not drunk." I just told her that we weren't comfortable serving her son anymore as he was way too drunk. Well, this Karen was apparently a bar manager for 30 years. And she thinks I shouldn't have cut her son off. She demands where our point system is. And for a moment, I completely forgot whether I'm in school or not because point system. She then responds with, "My son has not done drugs, he's not broken a glass, he's not started a fight." And this is when I say to her, okay, so how people should behave in a place like this. But ma'am, he's still very, very drunk, and we've got the right to refusal. Now it should have ended there, but it didn't. She then starts demanding a piece of paper to write a complaint on how she wasn't given a reason. And then, she proceeds threatening me about Steve. She said something like, "I'll tell Steve about this and he'll never step foot in this pub again. I hope you're happy that you ruined this business." Now, this Steve family must have been pure royalty or something, like celebrities basically. And I didn't get the memo because who the F is Steve? Anyways, the woman ends up telling her son to leave, and we haven't seen them since, and we hope to never see them again. You know what, if I had to get my mom to fight my battles in public like that, you'd better believe I would never show my face again in that place, out of sheer embarrassment, not the crappy service. But imagine that, right? Angry because the bartender won't let your drunk son drink more. Like, do some people not hear themselves speak? And if you think that mom was bad, listen to this next post where a dad throws a tantrum. I just had a situation at work that reminded me of this moment. This story happened about 7 or 8 months ago. I'm a bartender, so anyone in a similar position will be more than likely to have a similar experience to this. At the time, I'm working for a pub, so I'm tending the bar when a group walks in. And this is a proper pub where people order at the bar. The spokesperson who comes up is a D-bag along with his son. The guy starts rattling off a round of drinks, which is nothing terrible here, although he did jump straight into drinks with no hello or friendly greeting. And then we get to his son's drink. The guy's son, as it turns out, has been in a terrible accident. He's received a head injury that impairs his speech. I don't know this at the time, but his son's ability to communicate is limited to grunts and pointing, so I follow his finger and I see a cocktail. The dad then says, "I'm not buying you some dainty girl's drink, pick a proper drink." To which I thought, great, he's one of those people. The guy's son seems unhappy, but he chooses a flavored tap cider. To which I say, okay, I just need to see your ID before I pour it. This is when D-bag picks up his phone and he scrolls a bit, and then shows me a photo of some letter with a date of birth on it. That's it, just a set of numbers on a letter. I then say to him, I apologize, but I can't accept this. He then says, why not? I respond, because it doesn't prove that it's him. Now, there's other reasons, of course, like Photoshop, but I just stick with the basics. The guy then says, with an entitled attitude, "Okay, well, what else do you want to know?" I respond, "I'd like to know that you have some sort of government-issued ID, such as a passport or driver's license." Hearing that, he's outraged, and he says to me, "Driver's license? Look at him. My son's disabled. He's got a head injury, and he can't drive. Are you stupid?" I then say to him, "Okay, there's no need to say that to me. I'm terribly sorry to hear that, but it doesn't excuse him from needing ID to have an alcoholic drink." The guy then says to me, "That's disgusting. I'm not paying for drinks if you're not serving my son." At this point, I'm starting to get annoyed because I don't tolerate customers getting pissy with me for doing my job. And I say to him, "Okay." I then come out from behind the bar and I begin collecting the drinks that I've made. Naturally, there are some unhappy faces, but I explain I'm not giving out free drinks and this guy doesn't want to pay for them. The guy's full on yelling now and he says to me, "What more do you want, idiot? I've shown you his date of birth." And me, raising my voice slightly in response, say, "No, you haven't. You've shown me a date of birth. That letter could be to anyone, and those numbers could be random numbers. There's no photo attached to prove anything." Now, the next part is a bit fuzzy, but it does end with the guy and his son leaving, saying that he'll just go get a drink across the road. From what I'm led to believe, he went across the road and he was refused obviously because his son had no ID. And then he had the nerve to try to come back and ask to be served. From what I've heard, one of the guys in his group did mention that his son wasn't even of legal age to have been served. Why am I not surprised that the son wasn't of legal drinking age? Like when people fight and argue that much, usually that's a red flag. And I do get it, the dad wanted his son to partake in a group activity with them, but do it legally, sir. And especially don't cause that big of a scene. And this person shares their short story and they say, "So first, I'm gonna let you all know a bit about me. I don't really drink, I don't do drugs, and I've been homeless for a while. I managed to find myself a job way up north at a marina far from my city, and this literally just happened. I was sitting at the counter. My job involves renting boats and cottages, and we have a storefront that sells beer, fishing supplies, boat rentals, and food. A person comes up to the counter with a 24-pack of beer and tried to buy it. The guy looked young, he was under 19 years old. And I want to note that I'm Canadian, so you need to be 19 to purchase alcohol. Anyways, the guy didn't have ID, so I told him I couldn't sell him booze. He just clapped back at me saying it's okay because he's 20. I tell him I can't sell you anything without ID. No ID equals no sale. The guy really talked down to me, saying he's old enough and told me not to make him get it. He then pointed to his car and he says he's busy. So that's when I say, "So you're driving without a license?" He then gets flustered and leaves. About 30 minutes later, this older woman walks in and I see the kid from before outside. She grabs a 24-pack and she comes up to the counter. She pointed outside and she asked if I was the person who wouldn't sell her kid beer. And I said, "Yeah, no ID, no sale." She then huffed at me and said, "Whatever," and then tried to make her purchase. This is when I ask her, "Does your kid have his ID on him now?" She says no, that she's buying the beer so it doesn't matter. To which I respond, "Unfortunately, I can't sell it to you without him having his ID." That's when she screams at me saying that she's in her 40s and she has her license. That's when I explain that I can't sell her alcohol, knowing that she's giving it to a potential minor or someone without ID. This is when she starts screaming. She calls me a moron, flipped me off, knocks a bunch of single shots off my counter, and she said she was gonna call corporate to complain about me. I just told her, it's a small business, but I'll give you the owner's number. The woman then left, and I called the owner to explain everything. She just laughed, and she said I handled it perfectly, so yeah. So this is a longer story, and I did remove a few parts of the story and dialogue because it was way too long. What remains still conveys the double entitlement of the situation. A group of 12 of us friends decides to go out to dinner while on a golf trip. We arrived at the restaurant and they weren't ready for us yet, and they had us go into the bar. Most of us ordered soda. I ordered green tea, while 4 of them ordered top shelf drinks. A lot of top shelf drinks. I mean, they were downing drinks like it was water or something. After about 20 minutes, our table was ready, so we asked for the bills. Most of you know exactly where this is going. The waitress comes back with one bill and she hands it to the drinkers who asked for a single bill. Friend number 1 looks at the bill for a moment and he pulls out his phone. He then types something and he says, okay, so everyone's share comes out to $48 plus tip. Everyone else that wasn't drinking just looked at him. And yes, the 4 of them ran up over $550 in drinks in under 20 minutes. And they expected everyone else to pay for it too. This is when friend number 2 says, come on, cough it up. And just the way he said it. This is when I say, yeah, no, I only ordered a green tea. I'm not paying $48 for a green tea. Friend number 1 says, just pay up. To which I respond, forget it. What was my drink, like $5? One of the other friends, emboldened by my response, says, I only ordered a Sprite. I'm not paying $48 either. This got the others grumbling too. Right about now, the tables turned on the 4, with the 8 of us refusing to split the tab. Cue the alcohol, reducing the inhibitions of one of the 4 to bring out his true self. Friend number 2 turns to me and says, you're such a cheap ass. You should be paying for everyone's drinks anyways. You're rich. I respond, what are you talking about? He then says, you make more than the rest of us, so you should be paying for everything for everyone, every time we go out, including this trip. Now that phrase, everything for everyone, every time we go out, really burned me when he said it. Now why in the world would anyone think that somebody else should be paying for everything for everyone? I do make a good living, but that was about it. The kicker is, one of our friends did make huge bank and everyone knew about it, and he was even there with us. Friend number 2, however, had his sights set on me because there were some jealousies that he and his wife had that I won't get into. This is when I say to him, screw you. Having the cheapest person I know calling me a cheap ass is absurd. I'm not paying $48 for a glass of tea. Now, most of you won't believe this part, which is fine, for it's completely unbelievable. If it didn't happen to me, I wouldn't believe it either. Friend number 2 then gets his wife on the phone. Don't get me started on that part. He puts her on speakerphone and he tells her that I won't split everyone's drink bill. And she proceeds to tell me off over speakerphone to everyone in earshot. Now, I don't remember exactly everything she said because it was so ridiculous and I was fuming. I do remember her parroting how I should be paying for everything, so they were obviously talking about that sentiment before. Eventually, I dropped this little gem on her. I say to her, if I wanted a bunch of people to leech off my wallet, I would have a bunch of kids. You two are the cheapest people I know. Followed by a few examples of just how cheap they were and how they took advantage of friends. The wife then screams at me over the phone. I don't remember exactly what she said, but I do remember it being more drivel and entitlement. I did eventually say, F you, which was totally called for. The wife then says to me, don't you cuss at me. Now this is another part of the story that most people won't believe, which is fine. She just keeps screaming, don't cuss at me again or I'm going to hang up. Now just imagine the mentality of someone giving this threat in this situation and thinking it would carry any weight. I just said to her, "Go ahead and hang up, I didn't call you." I then looked at friend number 2 and I threw down a few bucks on one of the tables and walked towards the waitress. I was done with that whole scene, and so was everyone else. No idea what further conversation went on back there, but most of the guys came to the table shortly after, except the drinkers, which I'm sure were trying to figure out how to pay their bill. And here's the aftermath. Number 1. We did sit at different tables for dinner. The drinkers got their own table, the rest of us another table. We didn't talk about what happened much because I think we were all confused by it all. Number 2, we did finish our trips, although the dynamic changed as well when we got home. The drinkers kind of hung out by themselves. Number 3, after that trip, we did go on one final Vegas trip with the whole group. And the best part was friend number 2 got rolled by a pair of hookers to the tune of $700 on the first night there. They cleaned out his wallet, while obviously his wallet was out of his possession. I'm sure you can figure that one out. He changed his flight and he went home that night. Number 4, neither friend number 2 nor his wife have spoken with anyone in our group for years. Last I heard, he cashed in every dollar of his savings and retirement to buy a bigger and better house and furnish it with everything his wife wanted. Within a few years, they had to sell off that house and move in with his parents. No idea if she ever found out what really happened in Vegas. And lastly, yes, I did drink that green tea. Once again, the entitlement of some people. Like, it was already dumb for everyone to have to split $500 in shots. But then to say, you make more money than all of us, so you have to pay every time. With friends like that, you don't need enemies. And don't even get me started on him getting his wife on the phone to give OP crap. Like, some people are that pathetic. Like, oh, you don't want to pay $48 for a $5 green tea? Let me get my wife to yell at you. And this person comments, I once knew someone who tried to pull a similar stunt in a restaurant. They ordered the priciest item on the menu and then tried to stick the group with her tab. We bitched her out and we left her to figure out how to pay for her own stuff. So this happened about a month ago, but I only recently heard the full story directly from the owner involved. A fellow restaurant owner in my area had closed the dining room for the evening because the entire place had been rented out for a large private event. I think it was some kind of anniversary party or corporate function. They were still doing takeout orders, but nobody except employees and guests were allowed inside. Employees were bringing orders out to the parking lot for pickup. The day of the event, Karen and her not Karen friend pulls into the parking lot and got out of the car. One of the employees was walking a takeout order to a customer when he spots them and politely explained the restaurant wasn't open to the public that evening because they were hosting a private event. Karen apparently went nuclear. She just starts yelling how she was sick and tired of restaurants thinking that they're too good for paying customers, and she demanded that they seat her and her friend immediately. The employee just calmly repeated that the dining room was reserved for a private function, and there was nothing he could do. I guess they went back and forth for a bit before Karen responded by kicking him in the leg. Despite getting kicked, the employee managed to stay between Karen and the entrance. That's when she doubles down and she stomps directly on his foot. The owner saw the initial kick and the stomp from inside. He yells for another employee to call 911 and then rushed outside to help. Meanwhile, Karen apparently was unaware that the police were on their way, and she screamed at her friend to call the cops because the restaurant was refusing service. Her friend just stood there in the middle of the parking lot, frozen in disbelief. Karen just kept trying to force her way inside, but the employee she assaulted had fallen in front of the doorway while trying to stop her. And honestly, this would have been a fantastic time for Karen and her friend to get back into the car and leave. Instead, the first officer arrives. Karen immediately assumed that he was there to force the owner to seat her. Poor delusional Karen. The officer informed her that he was responding to an assault call. He takes one look at the employee on the ground and he called for an ambulance while another officer arrives. Karen then began screaming that the employee was faking his injury. By the time a third officer showed up, she was shouting that she had been assaulted and that everyone was lying. Meanwhile, paramedics start treating this employee. The owner then quietly invites one of the officers inside to review security footage. Outside, Karen suddenly announces that she was leaving. But of course, the officers informed her that she had to stay while they investigated. The owner had security cameras covering both inside and outside, and the entire tantrum had been recorded. To make matters worse for Karen, the customer who had been receiving this takeout order had recorded a part of the whole thing on his phone, and he captured her screaming at the employee. When the officers informed her that she was being arrested, Karen completely lost it. She grabs one of the officers by the arm and she pinched him so hard that apparently it left a bruise, which obviously was a bad move. The whole time, Karen's friend had not moved. Her eyes were huge and she seemed incapable of processing what her friend had just done. Since she'd done absolutely nothing, she was allowed to leave. As for the employee, he suffered 2 broken toes. Apparently, Karen stomped that hard. In the end, she was handcuffed and then stuffed in the back of a patrol car, and she spent the entire ride screaming that she would have everyone's badge, all because she couldn't accept that a restaurant had been rented out for a private event. The next day, one of the officers stopped by to check on the employee. He told the owner that they'd been seeing more and more people getting arrested and banned from businesses over ridiculous incidents. What surprised him was that many of them had never been in trouble with the law before. Karen, who was 58 years old and had no previous record, was now facing assault charges and a lawsuit from the employee. Listen, we've all heard of people getting hangry, right? But holy moly. For her to attack an employee like that and have it get to the point where she's got a criminal record, definitely not worth it. Like, I know in some people's minds, what's a harmless foot stomp and a little shin kick, right? Which is exactly what she probably thought, but I bet she didn't expect that to happen. I just love how her friend was standing there speechless the whole time. Like, what are you doing, Karen? Before I got into business and reporting analysis, I was a waitress for about 8 years. I have far too many stories, but this one is by far one of my favorites. Here's some background. I was working at a pub as a supervisor. I had a personal alcohol license, as in the UK, you have to have someone on site with one. And we have to abide by certain laws, as well as the premise license can also dictate what we can or can't do. Failure to do so can mean the loss of your license, the premise license, and a personal fine if you're caught. Also, you can lose your job. The issue is these two can sometimes contradict one another, and this is important for later. So all that said, we had a family come in one evening wanting dinner. One of the 2 children was 15 or 16 years old. I sat the family down and I told them the specials and then asked what they'd like to drink. Mom orders a lime and soda, Dad orders a pint of lager, and the 15 or 16-year-old orders a small glass of wine. Now, we had a challenge 25 policy in place, which meant if you looked younger than 25, we would ask you for an ID. So I asked her for the ID, and this is where it all starts. The mom says, you don't need to see her ID. I respond, unfortunately, it's our policy to ID anyone who looks younger than 25, which your daughter does. The dad says she's 16. By law, it allows her a small glass of wine. Now, you remember what I said about contradictions between law and license, right? This was one of them. By UK law, you're allowed to have a small glass of wine or half a pint of lager with a meal if you're with a parent or guardian and you're 16 or 17 years old. Most premises licenses prohibit this, as it is harder to prove if you're 16 or 17, as you don't go out with ID usually. The pub that I worked at had this in their license. so it didn't matter if she was 16, she wouldn't be allowed it. So I tell the parents I'm very sorry, but I can't give her the wine, as it is prohibited in our license to sell alcohol to her. We do have a great line of mocktails though, if she'd prefer. The mom says, no, she will have the wine. I just tell the mom, no, I won't be selling her any wine as it could cost me my job, and this place could be shut down if an inspector came in to ID her. Now, not all entitled people have to shout to be entitled. Sometimes, it's the calm, not my problem attitude that makes an entitled person what they are. That's what this woman was. The mom says, I don't care about that. Just bring her what she asked for. The kid then says, I want wine. My parents said I could have it and I want it. And I knew where this was going. I had to stand my ground. I say to her, I'm sorry, but I can't sell you any wine. Is there anything else you'd like? And this is when the woman starts bitching to her husband, exasperated that I wouldn't bring her darling girl a glass of wine. This is when the dad chimes in and says, look, it's her birthday. Is there any way you could overlook it just this once? His words were nice, but his tone was expectant that I'd relent. And I say to him, no, I'm sorry. Right about now, the mother throws her hands up in exasperation, and she says, you've made me want a glass of wine now. I'll have one instead, and she will have a Coke. I respond, thank you, I'm sorry, and just to reiterate, the wine's for you, not for her. I may have to ask you to leave if she's seen drinking the wine. The mom just says, whatever. So with that, I go off and make the drinks. I come back and take their food order. I put it through to the kitchen and I ask one of my members of staff to keep an eye on them while I went for a quick break. Well, imagine my surprise when I came back from my break to see the kid drinking the wine and mom drinking the Coke. I was pissed. I start walking over there and Karen notices me and she tries to switch back the glasses. I say to her, hi folks. Now, I don't want to cause a scene, but I did say when taking your drink order that your daughter couldn't drink wine on the premises, which you indicated that you understood what the consequences may be. This is when the mom plays dumb and she says, I don't remember that. The whole time having a sneer on her face that basically said, and what are you going to do? Now, if she had been decent, I would have just given them another warning, but since she was a bitch, I took another route. I say to her, whether you remember or not, I remember saying it. And unfortunately, because of this, I have the right to ask you to pay for your food and drink and leave. And this is when the dad blows up and says, no, we're not leaving and I refuse to pay. How dare you treat us like this? I demand to speak to a manager. To which I respond, I am the manager tonight, so you'll have to deal with me. Please calm down, sir, as you're disturbing the other guests. At this point, more and more people have begun viewing our little spectacle, none more so than the elderly gentleman and his son who are at the next table. The elderly gentleman comes in and says, how dare you, young man, I've had enough. This young lady's explained that your daughter could not have a glass of wine, and you defied that, putting her job and this place at risk for your own selfishness. And this is when the dad says to the old man, you need to shut the F up. If I want a lecture, I'd call my own dad. I just say to the dad, sir, if you don't calm down, I will have no choice but to have you forcibly removed by police if necessary. This made the dad balk, and his wife wasn't having any of it. She doubles down and says, we're not leaving. We will leave on our own time, and you will bring us the rest of the bottle of wine as compensation for your rudeness. I just laughed at that. To think I'd do that was ridiculous and delusional to say the least. I just say to her, I'm sorry, I'm done being patient, so pay and leave. I'll have your food packed up for you to go. I then reach for the daughter's plate first, and that's when Dad grabs my wrist and he squeezed it hard until it hurt. And he says to me, "Don't you touch that." A bit scared at this point, I struggled with what to say until he yelled in pain. I look over to see that the old man has told my employee to call the police, and he had struck the dad with his cane to get him to release my arm. His son had taken up beside him, and there was a few people shouting at them to let go. About 10 minutes later, 2 officers arrived and they took my statement. The family obviously told some stupid story, which was proven false by the security cameras and its audio. The father was charged with child endangerment of a minor because his daughter was actually 15, not 16. He was also charged with assault and resisting arrest. I think he got fines and community service. The mom was cautioned, and she was told to pay for the food and any other costs incurred by her and her partner. In the end, I got a well-earned day off. And the thing is, if they'd had a nice meal at home, it would have been fine for his daughter to have a whole bottle of wine if she wanted. Some people just have to take it too far, right? Like, the self-entitlement is off the charts with these parents. Like, would it have been nice for their daughter to enjoy a glass of wine at dinner with them? Sure, why not? But to cause that much of a stink that led to an arrest, especially when she's not of legal drinking age, shame on you parents. They got what they deserved in the end. The old man with the cane is also badass. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode, another one where psycho Karens are moving into the neighborhoods and they're actually tormenting people. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.